Hello all. Good afternoon all. Testing 1 2, David Crisafulli, being joined by Laura Gerber, Shadow Assistant Minister for Justice, Sam O'Connor, Shadow Environment Minister. Testing 1 2 3. We're good? Well, this report is 13 months old. The government's had it for 8 months and they released it after 8 p.m. last night after a horrible day dealing with youth crime. Doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? Where the government believes that its management of the media cycle is more important about managing to keep your family safe. This report is stale and it is a beacon for a government that has failed to keep the community safe from a youth crime wave that is gripping Queensland. The figures don't lie, and in a moment I'll ask Laura to unpack some of the things that are in the report, but the government has sat on this for a long time. And I'll tell you what it doesn't reflect. If your car has been stolen in the last 13 months, this report does not reflect the suffering that you have experienced and the impact that has had on you making a living. If your home has been broken into in the last 13 months, it does not reflect the impact and the trauma that that has on your child's sanctuary. If your business has suffered increasing premiums because you've been knocked over time and time again in the last 13 months, it doesn't reflect that either. The government took a conscious decision to water down the laws, and we have a generation of youth crims that know their way around it. And Queenslanders are getting a little tired of the government talking tough when before their eyes there is a crime wave gripping the community. Tough talk does not keep communities safe. Good governments plan, deliver and evaluate. This one announces and walks away until the media cycle works for them. The report is 13 months old. The government has held on to it for 8 months. That tells you everything you need to know about a government that refuses to plan, deliver and evaluate the youth crime wave that is ripping this community apart. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you. Look, what this report demonstrates is that the Palaszczuk Labor government cannot front up and cannot fix this youth crime wave. We know that part of this report unpacks the fact that there were $3.8 million spent on GPS trackers over 3 years. That's a failing. We also know that kids are pleading guilty just to get out of jail. This is some of the detail that's in this report. We also know that there is year on year been an increase in teenagers becoming serious, repeat youth offenders. I'm going to repeat that. This report shows that year on year there is an increase in teenagers becoming serious, repeat offenders. Now, by that metric alone, this government has failed these kids and they've failed to keep our community safe. Now, the other aspect of this report that I want to touch on is the fact that the Youth Justice Minister failed to turn up to even answer questions. I think the fact that this report was released in the dead of the night and then we have the Premier and the Youth Justice Minister failing to turn up just tells you everything that you need to know about this Palaszczuk Labor government. They've stopped caring and their policies have failed, and Queenslanders deserve a lot better.
Thanks, Laura. And on another very serious issue where the government has failed to be open and transparent with Queenslanders, it's the contamination on the Darling Downs. And the Environment Minister still has a lot of questions to answer about the cover-up she has overseen. She knew 18 months ago that there were very dangerous levels of benzene and cyanide on these properties. She has focused solely on media management instead of environmental management, and her own actions show that. When the media first started asking about this last week, she refused to answer questions and she palmed it off to the department. When we found out that the levels were 25 times above the drinking water level for benzene and 11 times above the drinking water level for cyanide. She called that negligible. And it wasn't until landholders kept raising these concerns and saying they should have been told, it wasn't until we had brave whistleblowers putting their careers on the line to get this information out there for Queenslanders that the Environment Minister committed to putting this on the website and being transparent with Queenslanders. It should not have taken that much. It should not have taken 18 months. And it's not good enough, and we'll continue to call it out and to raise issues of transparency with the environment and to focus on outcomes.
Thanks, Sam.
Based on what you've seen so far, do you think it's worth expanding the rollout of ankle bracelets and worth the money and time?
Well, I think the comments from the former police commissioner in that regard were spot on, weren't they? 3.8 million for 3 GPS trackers. And I heard the Youth Justice Minister say, well, the reason why they weren't fitted is because those people were denied bail. Well, then who was stealing the cars in record numbers? Who were breaking into the homes at record numbers? This report clearly outlines the abject failure that policy was. The fact that it's taken so long for the government to acknowledge this and bring it to the fore will be ashes in the mouths of every Queenslander over the last 13 months who've had their lives ripped apart by a youth crime wave that is tearing Queensland to the bone. And the figures are sobering. And I've pulled the figures for the last 12 months and compared it to the last 12. And some of the rises in unlawful entry and theft of vehicles is sobering.
The Premier mentioned that on the presumption against bail laws, there's now clear evidence that it's working, and that tough stance is working, because there are more younger people being reminded.
I saw those comments. Those comments relate to a stale report from a Premier who has stopped listening and not reflecting what Queenslanders are telling us. Look at this. For the 12 months to November, to this report, since it's been released, unlawful use of a motor vehicle up 17%, unlawful entry up 18%. In Cairns, it's 75%. In Townsville, it's 33%. In Brisbane, both north and south, it's gone up. So the Premier can talk about her so-called tough laws. Queenslanders are in the grip of a youth crime wave, and the government has sat on a report that is now 13 months stale, and its response is to tell Queenslanders how great things are while they're going out to their front lawn and the car's not there to allow them to earn a living, and their child is shaking because their bedroom has been broken into. A stale report from a government in its third term that's given up listening.
What about Essendon being sold on the breach of bail as a policy? Do you think presumption against bail is the better option to go?
Marlene, I agreed with a lot that the former Commissioner said in that regard, a lot. And he reflected what frontline police are telling us, and that is how frustrated they are with knowing that they can't do anything to intercept someone before they commit a crime. And that's why we must introduce breach of bail as an offence in the Youth Justice Act. It enables consequences for actions. It enables the men and women who wear blue uniforms to be able to get in and intercept someone before they break into another home, before they steal another car. And I took a lot of heart from what former Commissioner Atkinson said.
On the timing of the release of the report, the Youth Justice Minister and the government's mentioned that during that time, while they were considering it, they were also talking with stakeholders. Do you think that while they were doing that, they could have released it at the same time?
I might ask Laura to make some comments about the Minister's absence on that, but I'll just make this point. The report has information that is 13 months old, and the government has had it for 8 months, and they released it at 8 p.m.
The Youth Justice Minister is in WA at the moment, talking about and working. But just on the timing of it, do you think, in light of the Coldrake review and those recommendations about being more transparent, they should have been faster to release it, given that people were asking about it?
We've asked for this report dozens of times, including in the last sitting of Parliament. I'm sure the Minister, during the course of the last 8 months, hasn't spent the entire time in the West. The Minister should have released this many, many months ago. And if she had, maybe the solutions that they need to be serious about could have been put in place. And maybe Queenslanders whose lives have been ripped apart might have been able to get some justification and some justice. I spoke with someone this morning from Hervey Bay, Aggie. She's been broken into 6 times since August, and when I phoned to check on her this morning, in the last few days she's had another vehicle stolen. This report doesn't reflect a thing that's happened to her because it's been sitting on a shelf for many months. Did you want to make a comment?
Melina, absolutely the Youth Justice Minister should have released this report earlier. 100% she could have been engaging with stakeholders and allowed the community and the public to see this report. But just on engaging with stakeholders and advocacy groups, one of the things this report reveals is that those advocacy groups and departments aren't confident that the legislative reforms that have been put in place are working. Now, there's some stats in here that represent that. So 84% of advocacy groups don't believe the GPS trackers worked. Another stat, 73% don't believe that seeking assurances of the young criminals' parents worked. Now, that should have been released months ago so that we could start implementing or fixing this problem. How do you propose to fix a youth crime wave if you're not prepared to shine a light on it, if you want to hide reports, if you want to bury them so they're stale? It just tells me everything that I need to know about this state government. They've seriously given up on trying to fix the youth crime wave.
I have a question about Carol.
Yeah.
We just heard from the Premier this morning. Do you think it's appropriate for the Commissioner to be guaranteed her job before the Premier has read the report in full?
Well, I'll let the Premier speak for herself in that. My position hasn't changed, and I've been very consistent on that. I haven't seen the report yet, and I would hope that that's furnished to the opposition as soon as possible. More importantly, I hope it's furnished to Queenslanders, but save for something that comes out of that report that I'm not aware of, I believe the Commissioner deserves the opportunity to drive the cultural change that's needed.
Okay, so you'd like to see her stay in the job?
And I've been consistent on that. Now, I haven't seen the report, but save for something coming out of that, I believe that the Commissioner deserves the opportunity to drive that change.
Why is that?
Because she's 3 years into a 5-year job. And as I said, I don't know what's in that report. The state government does. They have it. But cultural change is important, as is ensuring that the police know that we value what they do. And those bad apples need to be weeded out, and that bad culture needs to be weeded out. But I tell you what, there's a hell of a lot of people that wear blue uniforms that need to know what we think of them. We think they're a mob of heroes. They put their body on the line, they kiss their families goodbye every morning and go to work and hope they come home. And they mean a lot to us. And there are some cultural issues that need to be overcome. And we want to see that fixed. We want a safe, respectful, inclusive working environment, and we want police to be able to walk the streets and hold their head high. And save for anything coming out of that report that I haven't seen, the Commissioner deserves the opportunity to do that job.
The Premier's announced that the report will be released on Monday after Cabinet considers. Are you pleased with that timing of that?
Well, if the Coldrake recommendations had been put in place many months ago, that would be business as usual. So that's a good thing.
And I have a couple of questions on housing as well, in terms of the housing and rental prices. There's some criticism that nothing's changed since the housing summit. We're still waiting for that review about the short-term accommodation, like the Airbnb investigation.
It's disappointing. Media announcements and backslapping won't put a single roof over a vulnerable Queenslander's head. A government that plans, delivers and then evaluates will, and we're not seeing that at the moment. And it's almost as though the summit was held. You had so many people go there with such goodwill across the government, non-government sector, all sides of politics. People went into that room with goodwill, and they deserve to know that it wasn't a vanity exercise, that it wasn't a PR exercise, and they deserve to know that the government will actually plan and deliver something. Not another media conference, not another promise that something will happen down the track, but a series of deliverables that also have KPIs so that ministers can be held accountable. The government has missed every social housing target it has set itself for 7 years. The Auditor-General says that. It's not just the opposition saying that. The government has not been able to lever from the community housing sector what other states have. The government has released 27% fewer lots, which would have got young people into the market. They've failed every metric. So please, on behalf of every person who turned up to that summit, more importantly, on behalf of every Queenslander living out of a tent, cut the media announcements and just plan and deliver something that you say you're going to do. That's what vulnerable Queenslanders deserve.
What's your advice to people who are feeling hopeless though and they don't have any options? We've spoken to a couple that are still living in unlivable conditions in their rental property for like the last month or so, and it's been quite unbearable for them. I mean, what do you say to those people who are feeling like there's nothing they can do?
The same thing that I said to the Queenslanders who I saw in the flesh when I went and met them living out of a tent. Working Queenslanders living out of a tent. Vulnerable Queenslanders living out of their car. I say the same thing to them as I say to the thousands who I haven't had the privilege of meeting, and that is that you matter, and every Queenslander matters, and there's a whole heap of people who are on your side and are fighting for you, and there are solutions on the table, and if the government listens, things can be much better than they are now. And it involves infrastructure to open up the land supply and more units, and that's a partnership with councils and government to deliver more lots and more housing opportunities so young people can get in the market and people can rent. It involves an ambitious partnership with the community housing sector to ensure that they can come in and lever off their assets and have more homes for the less fortunate. And it involves the government setting targets for social housing and holding ministers accountable. Because what we've seen in recent years has been a failure to meet every target, and somehow it's, oh well, we'll give that another crack at another time. That doesn't work. And if those three elements can be overcome, we can house our vulnerable Queenslanders. And in the meantime, when a government makes a promise to open up units that are already there and vacant, when the government makes a promise to somehow unlock granny flats, a bit of follow-up after the media announcement would give heart to Queenslanders living out of their cars. Another media conference and another round of biscuits won't. Queenslanders deserve a government that can plan and then deliver what they say they're going to do. Thanks all. See you later. Thank you.